Star Trek was a groundbreaking 1960s science fiction television series, which was unlike anything audiences had seen before. The original series was created by Gene Roddenberry and was first aired on the NBC network in 1966. The Star Trek TV show was set in the distant future and chronicled the voyages of the crew of the Starship Enterprise and their 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds and to boldly go where no man had gone before. The series would last for 3 seasons, and during that time it became well known for its cultural influence and progressive civil rights stance, featuring a multicultural cast and one of the first multiracial kisses ever aired on American network television. Much of the early show is unique and memorable, and despite its disappointing early ratings, the Star Trek franchise has gradually morphed into a cult phenomenon that boasts an almost religious following. But when it comes to toy licenses, the Star Trek brand has certainly experienced some rocky journeys. The best and most successful of these toy licensing expeditions came with Star Trek's voyage into the headquarters of a New York-based toy company called Mego. Hello Trekkies, my name is Tony and welcome to an Analog Toys special feature, the origins of Mego's Star Trek. Despite Star Trek's phenomenal modern day popularity, the original 60s TV series experienced only moderate success when it was first aired, but it was enough of a hit to pique the interest of the New Jersey based toy company Remco. From 1968 to 1971, the company produced many Star Trek licensed toys and games. However, none of the items to appear at retail during this period had anything to do with the Star Trek franchise. Remco simply relabeled many of the toys that they had already designed and slapped the word Astro on the packaging to make them sound space-worthy. While this range of toys is still somewhat collectible, they are also derided by many fans for not actually representing any of the characters or spaceships from the Star Trek TV show. Although Star Trek the original series was cancelled after only 3 seasons, the show had just enough episodes to be considered for television syndication, and Paramount Studios began advertising reruns in March 1969. Through syndication, Star Trek was aired on several networks throughout the United States, where it found a much larger audience than it had when it first aired on NBC, and by 1972 the show had become a cult classic, with more than 3,000 fans attending the first Star Trek convention in New York City. The growing popularity of Star Trek in the early half of the 1970s caught the attention of a man named Marty Abrams, who was then president of a toy company named Mego. Founded in 1954, Mego started out as an importer of dime store toys, but by 1972, the company was quickly becoming one of the most profitable action figure manufacturers in the world, and this rapid growth was due in no small part to their incredibly successful range of 8-inch tall, world's greatest superheroes action figures. In 1974, Mego released their first line of Planet of the Apes action figures, which was also their first line of movie tie-in toys. And during the same year, Mego also acquired the Star Trek license for a mere $5,000 fee. It's not difficult to understand why Mego would want the Star Trek license. Not only was the TV show becoming more and more popular day by day, but also all of the characters pretty much wore the same uniform, meaning that design costs could be kept to a minimum. The first wave of Mego action figures included Captain Kirk, the Science Officer Mr. Spock, Dr. Bones McCoy, Chief Engineer Scotty, and the Klingon.
Mego presents the Star Trek action figures featuring the crew of the Enterprise, Captain James T. Kirk, their fearless leader, Dr. Bones McCoy, caring for the health of the Enterprise crew, Scotty, the chief engineer, in charge of the transporter room, Mr. Spock, the Vulcan, second in command, and the Klingon, enemy of the Star Trek crew. Star Trek action figures, complete with accessories shown, each sold separately from Mego.
The Mego Star Trek action figures stood 8 inches tall and used the same basic body mould as their world's greatest superheroes figures, with one key exception. All of the Starfleet figures had retooled lower leg sections, where the characters' boots were incorporated into the plastic moulding, rather than being a separate accessory. This first wave was initially available on the Type 1 Mego body with metal riveted joints. However, subsequent releases were also available on the Type 2 Mego body with all plastic joints. This was also the first time that Mego action figures were available exclusively on blister cards, with previous products being available either carded or boxed. Each Starfleet officer came dressed in a handsome uniform that featured black cuff trousers and a tunic that was coloured according to the character's department. Gold for the command personnel, blue for science personnel, and red for operations personnel. These tunics were also adorned with a small silver foil Starfleet insignia. This insignia is very problematic for loose toy collectors, since the foil is wafer thin and easily falls off, leaving behind only the light grey plastic backing. Each officer also came equipped with a belt that carried a phaser and a communicator, and some characters, such as Mr. Spock, also came with the tricorder accessory. Mego's Star Trek action figures are wonderfully designed and they look truly great on display, and far and away their best attribute is their handsomely sculpted faces. Captain Kirk's face sculpt really does look like the actor William Shatner, but probably my favourite sculpt is Dr. Bones McCoy, who, with one raised eyebrow, not only looks just like the actor DeForest Kelley, but also evokes a level of character and emotion rarely found in a 1970s action figure. And while Mego's face sculpt for the Mr. Spock figure does look good, I feel it is closer in appearance to the look of Mr. Spock in the Star Trek animated series that first aired in 1973.
I love you. However, I hate you.
The Klingon were a race of warriors who represented the single greatest threat to the Federation. And this figure, while easily the most common to find, is my personal favourite from the first wave. The figure has a fantastic head sculpt, a belt that carries a red phaser and communicator, and he also wears a gorgeous uniform. But unlike the Starfleet officers, he even comes with a pair of removable high knee boots. Mego's first wave of Star Trek action figures are absolute classics, and as the toy line continued to grow in popularity, Mego added new products to help expand the toy line. The first character to be added to the line was Lieutenant Uhura, Communications Officer of the Starship Enterprise, who was portrayed in the TV show by Nichelle Nichols. By this stage, Mego's Star Trek must have been doing well at retail, because it would have been so much easier for the company to introduce a new figure like Ensign Chekhov or Mr. Sulu. But instead, Mego opted to release a female character, which required a different body and a completely new uniform design. Also released was the USS Enterprise playset, which is a must-have for any serious Mego Star Trek collector. This vinyl wrapped cardboard playset is quite large and also doubles as an action figure carrying case. The exterior of the playset features some nice artwork depicting the Enterprise travelling through space, and once opened, the set expands to a whopping 32 inches wide. Clearly Mego took some liberties with the interior decor, but somehow, against all logic, it still works as a toy.
The Star Trek USS Enterprise gift set with command chair, console, 3 telescreen cards, and 5 Star Trek action figures. Place Mr. Spock or any Star Trek figure into the transporter room. Spin the control knob and press the button. Mr. Spock disappears. Pretend he's left the deck of the Enterprise for outer space adventure. You can capture the Klingon and bring him back to the Enterprise. Star Trek USS Enterprise gift set. Star Trek action figures also sold separately by Mego.
Front and centre we have the main bridge that features a 3-part computer console that snaps together. Above the computer is the telescreen, and the playset comes with 3 double-sided cards depicting an assortment of different otherworldly images. The set also includes a captain's chair where Kirk can command the vessel, as well as 2 very basic crew seats. To the right of the playset we have the engine room, but there really isn't much here for Chief Engineer Scotty to do, and Mego certainly could have improved this set by adding another accessory for this area. Lastly, we get to the transporter, which is probably one of Mego's greatest toy innovations. The Mego Star Trek transporter was also available separately, and has since been made famous all over again by its legendary appearance in the TV comedy The Big Bang Theory.
Ta-da! A vintage mint-in-box 1975 Mego Star Trek transporter with real transporter action. Hot darn!
While the Mego transporter looks and acts nothing like the real Star Trek transporter, this is one hell of a fun toy. With a blue knob used to spin the transporter and 2 activation buttons, one red and one green, a child could place Dr. McCoy into the transporter. Give it a spin and just like a cheap magician's trick, Bones becomes Scotty. The transporter also has a secret rear door, where a child could further trick their friends by swapping out Dr. McCoy for Captain Kirk. But never mind the children of the 70s. To this day, the Star Trek transporter gives me hours and hours of innocent enjoyment. Following the outstanding retail success of Mego Star Trek line, it was natural for the company to press forward with more new products. So in 1975, Mego released their first wave of Star Trek aliens. These included the Neptunian, the Keeper, the Chiron, and the Gorn, the latter of which barely resembled its on-screen counterpart, being nothing more than a recoloured lizard who was one of Spider-Man's main villains in the world's greatest superheroes line. The only one of these figures I have in my collection is the Chiron, and he is in far from perfect condition, and that's because the Mego Star Trek aliens are exceedingly rare and way out of my price range, and Wave 2 of the Star Trek aliens are even rarer still. The second wave consisted of the Talassian, the Andorian and the Megatu, as well as the Mego Star Trek Holy Grail, the Romulan. These figures are not only the rarest Star Trek figures ever produced, but are also counted among the rarest Mego figures ever released, which legend has it is due to a fire at a Mego facility that destroyed a large portion of the Star Trek stock. By 1976, the Star Trek toy line was beginning to lose steam, so Mego discontinued the line in favour of other TV licenses. Unfortunately for Mego though, in 1976 they also declined the opportunity to manufacture toys for an upcoming science fiction B-movie entitled Star Wars. And as we all know, Star Wars went on to become one of the greatest action figure lines in history, and besieged by Kenner's unrivaled success in toy stores, Mego did everything it could to try and keep up with the dominant Star Wars toy line. So in 1979, when Paramount Studios released Star Trek the Motion Picture, Mego had a wide assortment of toys available at retail.
Star Trek! This is the exploration pod of the USS Enterprise, part of the Star Trek collection, each sold separately. Star Trek! This is the Klingon cruiser and the Vulcan shuttle. Vulcan shuttle has a breakaway cockpit. You can pretend they battled through space as you send the Enterprise to the rescue. Star Trek! USS Enterprise, Klingon cruiser and Vulcan shuttle from the Star Trek collection, each sold separately by Mego.
The best of these products were the 12-inch range of figures, but that scale was no longer popular with children, since Star Wars had quickly captured the attention of an entire generation with their 3 3/4-inch range of figures and vehicles. Undeterred, Mego also released a small range of 3 3/4-inch Star Trek action figures and an Enterprise Bridge playset, but these sold poorly, as did many of Mego's other licensed toy lines, until finally in 1982 the company filed for bankruptcy, and by the following year the Mego Corporation ceased to exist. Since that time, many other toy companies have had a stab at the Star Trek license. The best of these licensors was Playmates, with my favourite figures coming from the classic Star Trek line, but in my humble opinion, they will never hold a candle to the incredible range of figures and accessories produced by Mego during the dawn of the action figure age. Mego's line of 8-inch tall Star Trek action figures remains one of the best toy lines ever created by this legendary company. These toys are really enjoyable to collect and fun to display, so if you get the chance to add them to your collection, do not hesitate. So that's it for this episode. We really hope you enjoyed this trip into the history of Mego Star Trek action figures, and if you'd like to support the channel further, head on over to our Patreon page where you can get exclusive access to behind the scenes information on all of our upcoming videos. I'm Tony from Analog Toys, and until next time, live long and prosper.